Doing something like Cyber Essentials once a year and not using software to monitor is like brushing your teeth once a year. And if we can just get people to do the basics, we can reduce the amount of attacks significantly. But having 5,000 devices, we have no idea what they are and what state they're in, is just pure chaos. Every single business in the UK today that employs someone should do Cyber Essentials.
Welcome to the Making It Simple podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jamie Akhtar from CyberSmart. CyberSmart is a company that we have worked with for many years to help our clients achieve Cyber Essential certifications. Welcome, Jamie. Could you tell us a little bit about CyberSmart, where it came from and why you need it?
Yes, 100%. So, journey of CyberSmart, I'm going to start with my own journey first because I think very much CyberSmart is a creation and as a result of my experiences in the past as well. So I've spent the last 15 years, I say, building or breaking technology. So building stuff, I enjoy the creative activity of like building tech, whether that's web applications. I'm very passionate about helping businesses to achieve an outcome. So I spent a lot of time building stuff. I ran a digital agency doing software development, for example. And the second thing in my past I think is relevant to CyberSmart is I got really interested in the field of cybersecurity. So everything from security testing, this is the breaking bit. So trying to take apart systems, like why does a piece of hardware work like that? How does a computer work? And this includes dismantling pretty much every appliance in my house, I think, when I was a kid. But I've been fascinated by understanding how things work, very curious. And cybersecurity is a field where there's endless amounts of things to be curious about, from the technical side all the way up to governance and risk and compliance. So in my background as a security professional, I've done security testing, security architecture. I'm an ISO auditor, Cyber Essential auditor. So I quite enjoy dabbling in all these areas. To answer your question, through these experiences, go back about a decade. We're looking at how businesses protect themselves in what then was a scary world and what now I think is an increasingly frightening one. How do they protect themselves when there's more hackers out there? Everyone's getting connected to the internet. Customers are demanding us to show that we're secure, and we're like, this just doesn't work, especially for SMEs or smaller businesses. There aren't viable solutions and alternatives for small businesses that ever spend a load of money on a consultant, or they try and do it themselves and buy all these different tools and try and configure it, or they just accept the cyber risk. And far too often we were seeing back then that businesses were accepting the risk. And that's kind of what we've got to solve this problem. So we started building stuff. I started coding stuff. We started talking to customers about their problems and how we can help them. And our first version of our products and our platforms are early stages of what you see today. So CyberSmart to Protect, that software we build that monitors endpoints around the year. That first version of the application is what we built almost a decade ago. And looking at the Cyber Essentials and the questionnaire and being like, well, this is difficult. You need to have a degree in computer science to fill this in. How can we make this simple and more accessible? How can we change this from a pass fail to a guided experience where people will always pass as a result of us supporting them as much as they need? So that's kind of the very early origin story.
But where do you fit into this? Because most people would just consider cyber security. I'll speak to my MSP. They're just going to sort everything for me. And they have done. They've looked after me for years. I've never had a problem. Why do I need to have these audits done now?
That's a really, really good question. And I think there's a few aspects to it. I think MSPs have shifted. And I think the requirements from customers, so that the customers that MSPs have shifted. If we talk about the requirements from customers first, over the last, say, 10 years, almost all businesses now rely significantly on the internet. You think about the pandemic and people are moving remote or hybrid now. So what used to be quite a small level of digital exposure is now pretty significant. We think about AI and what if we couldn't use ChatGPT anymore ever again? Or what if the internet didn't exist right now? A lot of our businesses wouldn't be able to function the way they do today, right? So the exposure's increased, the amount of pressure from regulators, from for customers that is placed on customers, and customers have been increased as well. And the criminal activity and the broader threat landscape has got increasingly more hostile. Like the amount of cyber attacks goes up. I mean, not a report you read that says things are getting better, right? So these three factors, I think, are what are forcing organizations now that what used to be okay and fine and what worked in the past is no longer sufficient. And they go into their MSP and but, hey, this is what our pressure, how are you going to help us? Or like a customer said, are we doing patching in 14 days? Or the regulators has just sent us this sheet of 6 things we need to do. We need to implement multi-factor authentication. Are we using that? So they're often going to their MSP and asking them these questions. So that's part A. Part B is MSPs have evolved, and you'll know this better than anyone, over the last 10, 20 years from what was, the term break fix, for example. Like when things break, we're going to fix it, basically. So you got a laptop, it doesn't work, you call your MSP or your IT provider, and they'll give you a new one, or fix the settings on it. Kind of like what your parents do when they can't click the right buttons on the computer. Hey, this isn't working. So that model evolved from people that were basically just getting in there when they were needed to help, to actually like, we need to proactively take care of your devices, your software, your estate, your networks, because that's an important thing to do. And until about a decade ago, that was mostly, a decade or more ago, it was mostly IT focused. So it was more like, do you have laptops? Do you have mobile phones? Are you connected to the network? Is your internet working? All this type of stuff. And then what we see in the shift is that responsibility now includes security, and it increasingly includes compliance. So what I mean by that is people don't just want you to give them a laptop so they can work. They want that laptop to be secure, so then they can go to a hotel and they know that details are not going to be compromised. They want you to be informing them of the risks and the threats that they might be facing, and increasingly they want you to help them with things like compliance. Like, I'm regulated by the FCA, and they're asking me, they've asked me to follow these 10 steps. Can you help me with these 10 steps? And a lot of those are compliance and governance steps. Like, how would you respond in an incident, for example? So the role of the MSP has shifted, and the requirements from customers themselves have shifted. And so what may have worked in the past no longer works today.
So if we were to look at your business, what is it that you actually do for the customers and the MSPs that you work with?
So for the MSPs, I'm not going to answer all questions like this, but for the MSPs specifically, we give them the ability to move with their customers and their requirements, and service the demand that is there. So if the customers need compliance, they need certification, they need 24/7 protection, we can help them to meet that. So we help the MSPs to offer the service to their customers. For the customers themselves, this is where we create the value when it comes to mitigating cyber risk, demonstrating to their stakeholders that they're secure and compliant, and doing this on a continuous basis. So the way we do that is through our software, CyberSmart IT Protect. We feel like the only way to properly protect people is on a continuous basis, not point in time. I was joking earlier before we came in here with someone in the team that doing something like Cyber Essentials once a year and not using software to monitor is like brushing your teeth once a year. Like, it just doesn't help you to mitigate what might happen, right? So these things are habits, like patching our devices, making sure they're secure, making sure people are onboarding and offboarding correctly. Their habits, their processes in an organization that need to be bedded in. So we focus on how do we make all those bits as easy as possible, using our software, using our policy templates, and working with the MSP to deliver that as well.
So if you were to, I'm just thinking that people may not fully know what is Cyber Essentials. How would you describe it to our viewers today?
5 basic measures that reduce your risk by 90%, or also, I mean, there's some stats of like 96%, but it's almost all the cyber attacks that an SME faces, commodity cyber attacks, come down to a handful of very small things. So in the pandemic, there's the hands, face, space. Do you remember that? So it's like, do these 3 things, and it's going to significantly cut your chance of getting or passing an infection on. Cyber Essentials is very much like the equivalent for the digital world. And so like one of them is around access control. And a part of access control is making sure only the people that are authorized to access an account or system can do so. And instead of username and password, which can be guessed, it can be stolen, it can be reused in others, like password can be reused. One of the requirements is to set up multi-factor authentication, or MFA. And so that one step will reduce probably about 56% of all commodity attacks involve something around credentials or access control. So the government is sat down over a decade ago saying, cyber attacks are increasing. We constantly see breaches where people haven't got the basics in place, what they would class as basics. And if we can just get people to do the basics, we can reduce the amount of attacks significantly. So it was created to basically do that. So it's the equivalent of the hands-face space, but for the cyber world.
So that's Cyber Essentials, but where does Plus come into this?
That's a really good question. I'm going to do a myth buster on this one, because I've heard things like, oh, we've done the Cyber Essentials, but we're not ready for the Plus. And it's like, it doesn't make sense. The reason I say that is Cyber Essentials Plus is an audited version of Cyber Essentials. So it's no different than someone checking your answers that you've written are actually in place. So in theory, everyone that does Cyber Essentials, 100% of people should be able to do Cyber Essentials Plus on the same day they do Cyber Essentials. Now, in practice, there's often gaps, and some of those gaps are because they're not because people are filling in the form incorrectly for the most part. It's because people just don't know. Like I didn't know I had that old user account sitting on that computer. Oh, I didn't realize we had those mobile devices that are iPhone 6s, because when I told everyone to update, they went to update and it said up to date, but it's no longer supported. Oh, I didn't realize that Windows 10 went end of life. So there's these things where people just don't know, and they don't have visibility, or they're not monitoring it, and they don't know what the standard is or best practice, etc. So that's usually where the gaps come out, because there is a difference between paper and practice, right? And every auditor in the world will tell you that it's very rare to see someone's statement and declaration, whether it's an ISO audit or Cyber Essentials, 100% match what happens in reality. But the key is to bring those two as close as possible, and make sure that you've got the systems, the processes. That is more often than not the case that is happening. Take patch management as an example. Requirement of Cyber Essentials is 14 days to apply high or critical updates of severity updates within 14 days. At CyberSmart, we have a policy where we ask people to update all their devices. If they've got bring your own device or personal devices, we give them 7 days, and then our software kicks in at 10. So we've got system. Doesn't mean that we will always meet that deadline. Someone might be on holiday for 15 days, for example, and so they're not going to get their update until the day they come back. But we've got the systems, the processes, the technology in place to make sure that that happens. So that's the gap you're trying to close.
If I think back, 10 years ago, to the break fix days that you're talking about there, I had many conversations with customers that used to say, well, you know everything we've got, or I'd hear them say to somebody, our IT company looks after that, it's all sorted, we don't need to worry about it. And I'd be thinking in the background, well, we probably do, but we probably don't. Mm-hmm. Because in those days, customers used to just randomly go and buy a new piece of kit that we didn't know about. And the first we know about it was when they phoned us up and said they've got a problem with something. We're like, where's this come from? So we had to radically change our model because I heard the customers having an expectation that we had their back. And I was thinking, well, we try to have your back, but we probably don't have it fully. So we changed our model. And I think it's how most MSPs have gone, to be proactive, understanding the estate, but taking it to another level as well with our packages. Because since Cyber Essentials has come into play, people were having audits done and there was all sorts coming out of the woodwork. And they're like, well, yeah, we didn't know about that because that was a bring your own device, or we didn't know that was there, or we don't manage that. That was managed by your connectivity company, that router, nothing to do with us. We don't really know about it. So we had to change our model, that our package knows everything, change it to be proactive, looking after what the customers have got, so that we can actually say to our customers, everything we've put in place now ticks all of the boxes for you then to go and have that audit done and be able to prove that you meet the standard. And that's where we've gone to. But I've often heard people say that Cyber Essentials, mainly just the Cyber Essentials, is a tick box exercise. What would you say to that?
That is a great question. Let me come back to what you were saying just before that, because I think there's something really interesting there. The break fix days, and the reason I'll mention this is I think Linton is an exception. I think there's still a lot of MSPs, because like many service providers, a lot of people that are listening as well, is people don't want to say no to customers and or saying you're not a fit for us. And so we often end up saying yes and accepting and making exceptions as well, even when we say, no, we'll only work with customers of this size or who have this set up. And I think that's a big problem in the industry wide. I think you're doing 100% the right thing, because the only way you can have consistency and security and compliance is through knowing what's in there and managing it in a way that makes sense. I'll give you an analogy. Imagine a building site where the contractors working on the building site can bring their own equipment to the building site. Now, this is going to sound crazy, but imagine someone bringing their own scaffolding. Say, oh, I've got some scaffolding in my backyard. I'll bring that. Fine, I'll go set it up. So I was like, oh, I've got a bunch of tools in there. But this tools, this equipment, and the health and safety around that isn't the same standard or requirement that the building site would want. And it would be unfair to then blame the building site manager, or someone had an accident. Well, they're on top of this scaffolding that someone brought in using these tools that someone else brought in. So that's the equivalent in the IT world. So it's really, really important that MSPs actually move towards standardizing their stack. And it doesn't really matter what that stack is. It just needs to be standard for everyone, our customers. Ideally, obviously, include security baselines and it's in line with government standards, etc. But having consistency is a really important way of making sure that, all right, we manage 5,000 devices across our estate. We know that X percentage are meeting this baseline. We've got 100 that we know we need to do something with in the next 2 weeks, for example. But having 5,000 devices, we have no idea what they are and what state they're in, is just pure chaos, and it isn't sustainable, and it's not going to deliver an outcome. So, sorry, back to your original question, because I think it's a fascinating topic. The Cyber Essentials is just a checkbox exercise. You often get people say that to you. I think there's probably a few aspects to this. One, if you approach it like that, yes, it will be, and there are many companies that they have a customer or a requirement and they don't even know what this thing is called Cyber Essentials, but they've Googled it and like, great, they clicked on a link and they paid some money to someone and they're going through this questionnaire, and then they're like, oh, this is quite painful, and they're just kind of Googling answers or using AI to write some answers, and then they filled it in and then they've come back and they said, oh no, you're all wrong, you need to correct it, and it might pass, they might fail. That, if you approach it like that, it is a checkbox, because you haven't actually engaged with a subject matter. You haven't gone and done the necessary steps. So I say this is probably like a very small percentage of people actually, increasingly so, because people now are aware of the scheme and the benefits. Flip side, like what's the right journey to follow is speak to your MSP and be like, hey, can you tell us where we'd be in terms of Cyber Essentials today? I mean, obviously working with you've got it built into your packages, so it makes it much easier for them. But if they're not working with you, then it's a case of like talking to your MSP and saying, where are our gaps today? What would we need to do that? There's a free Cyber Essentials readiness questionnaire people can run through. NCSC have their cyber action toolkit, so there's lots of free resources. But starting with essentially the gap analysis, putting together a plan. Okay, well, we've got BYOD. BYOD is completely fine for Cyber Essentials, but we need to make sure that people's own devices are compliant. They're updating it within 14 days. They are using only approved app stores. They've set a PIN or a passcode, etc. So it may be a simple BYOD policy for your staff and your contractors to follow, but you have to go and do that step. You can't just pull up Cyber Essentials and say, yeah, we've done it, if you haven't done it. So it doesn't need to be a checkbox system. It isn't for the vast majority of companies, if you've approached it in the right way. And if you've done that, at the end of it, I mean, there's some stats around this as well, but like almost all 90% plus of people say they feel like they've got value and they've improved their security and they've recommended it to other people. And that's because they've done it properly. So I think the checkbox thing is it's probably a dying argument nowadays because less people see it as that. But that'll be my thoughts on that.
It's interesting that you say it like that, because if I think about our packages that we've got, so we've got our fundamentals package, which is geared for the small business that just needs the basics of IT support and just needs to be able to access email and 365. Doesn't really concentrate anything around security. That's a bit of antivirus in there, but it's just to get you started. This is the bare minimum. Then we have our secure support package, which is designed to, it's the standard really that most businesses should have in place. It covers nearly every sector, and it covers all of the measures to achieve cyber essentials. So we know that behind the scenes, we're putting all of the measures in place that tick all of the boxes, that if you then go for a cyber essentials audit, you're going to pass it. But quite often we have customers that are using old legacy products and things, and they say, well, I've passed Cyber Essentials for the last few years, and we're looking at it and going, you've kind of answered what they needed to hear to pass it, but we know that you're not really achieving it properly because you haven't got the measures in place. But it's a really difficult argument sometimes to say, look, you really need our secure support to get your Cyber Essentials. Say, I don't need it. I can just get it anyway. I have done. And I think some of those customers are the ones that are perhaps treating it as a tick box exercise. Yeah. It makes it a challenge, and I'm worried that some of those will actually find out the hard way.
The hard way being?
Something happens and they thought they were covered and they're not.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you talk about that, but what does actual good look like then for an MSP in your view?
For an MSP, I think an MSP would have a standard stack. I think the way you've put together your package and your proposition makes a lot of sense for many reasons. So one, it's simple. You've got bronze, silver, gold, star, crawl, walk, run, right? And everyone needs at least some connectivity and basics, like you said. Most people should be getting security and making sure they manage that. And ideally, you're going for best in class, like you're on top of it, you're proactive. So keeping it simple, standardizing your stack, your products within the stack as well as the hardware that you will and won't support. I think that's a really good starting point. I think for SMEs themselves, every single SME, every single business in the UK today that employs someone should do Cyber Essentials. You don't have to get the certificate, actually. You can still implement Cyber Essentials without the certificate, zero cost. But you should do those steps, like you should set up MFA, you should update your software and devices, you should make sure that you configure those devices correctly. You can do this yourself if you really want to. Obviously, it's probably harder for someone to do this themselves. Speak to your MSP, say, if you can't afford the cost, still just do the measures. So I think that's what the minimum of good looks like for an SME. I typically add to that list a thing that every SME should be doing right now is something around people and something around the ability to respond to things when they go wrong. So Cyber Essentials doesn't cover a few areas because they're not in the mega risk reduction. The Pareto principle of Cyber Essentials, not the 5 mega things. They're not in the requirements, but training your staff, or at least telling them that cyber is really important. And this doesn't need to be like some really in-depth security awareness training. It can just be like constantly reminding people and be like, hey, we spotted this phishing thing, make sure you watch out. And it's as much about vigilance as it is anything else, and creating a space where people feel comfortable saying, I think I've just done something wrong. I think I've clicked something or put my credentials.
It's really important, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's the one thing that we drum on all the time is the fact that if you're going to have a problem, it's going to be because of your people. And
yeah,
there's a stat about it. You probably know it better than me as to exactly what it is, but it's something like 99% of cyber breaches are a result of human error. And the cyber criminals these days, all they're trying to do is trick your people. So it's all about making sure your people know what to look out for.
Exactly, yeah. And I'd flip that stat. It is right. It's just, I'd say 99% of attackers target humans. I think it's, generally speaking, I think humans are not our weakest link, they're our strongest line of defense. I think they're targeted more frequently because we have manual systems and processes. Like if you can call a help desk and give them 5 secret things, they will reset your password. So that obviously the entry point that they're going to focus on, and it's not the person sitting on the other end of that phone line who is accountable for that happening. It's just the way the world works. We've got human squidgy things in between stuff. So that's often why attackers focus on that as an entry point, because there has to be a degree of flexibility, and those systems are getting better. Things like passkeys can help us with areas like that as well. So coming back to the what does good look like? Cyber Essentials are baseline. Doing something around people, security awareness training is a really good foundation around that. You can do phishing simulations as well. So like teach people about what to look out for, but there's many ways of doing this. And then on top of that, the ability to prepare for and respond to an incident. This is really what makes the difference between something being a bad day or something that happened and didn't lead to anything and like potentially losing your business. Your ability to prepare for and respond to an incident. So for example, if you've got no incident recovery plan, you've hosted you're using various cloud services, you're like a professional service firm using some key cloud software, all that data gets deleted, all your customer data, all your client records, your ability to run the business is virtually eliminated. If you haven't got backup for that, then that's a big problem. If you are a legal firm and you're delivering advice to your clients and you have a breach, the reputational impact could be really severe. So the ability to like understand what's going on, contain it, and I'm talking about ransomware, talking about data exfiltration, etc. So there's lots of things that could happen to a business that could be really small if you're properly prepared. Basics of that are go through your systems. What would you do if the worst happened? How would you recover? How would you respond? Who would do it? When would you do it? How would you communicate internally? What would you do if your main business system wasn't functioning? Do you have a backup, etc.? And then try and practice it. I mean, the NCSC's got their board toolkits. They're really, really good. All free, again, loads of free resources from the National Cybersecurity Centre. So like try and practice this, just do it once a year. Like, hey, can we just run through it, make sure it's up to date? Is this really what we do? That type of thing. So I'd say that's what a minimum level of good looks like for SMEs.
Well, the reason I asked you that question about managed service providers is simply because when we first started working with you or looking for a partner, the world of cybersecurity perhaps wasn't as new to you, but it was new and becoming more and more relevant in the MSP space. Our customers were starting to ask us about it more. And of course, we went through that process of, well, do we start hiring a cyber team? Of course, the costs associated with having an internal team, the expertise that you need to cover all eventualities, and the major initial one for me was what we were actually looking to do was have somebody audit what was happening. Mm-hmm. And that audit was auditing us and what we were doing for our clients as well. And it felt wrong for that to be an internal team that would be auditing ourselves. And that was the initial reason why we started looking for an external partner to help us help our customers with cybersecurity and their Cyber Essentials accreditations. Since those early days, things have evolved massively. So all of our packages that we've talked a little bit about today have been built and evolved around the Cyber Essentials standard and the products and services that you bring to the table to help our customers stay protected. And one of those is Active Protect. And this is something that comes up a lot because this is bundled in as part of when we give our packages to our customers that provide all of the services that they need, and then they want to have Cyber Essentials as an add-on. We have the core and complete packages, core being Cyber Essentials accreditation and a complete being for Cyber Essentials Plus. But it's actually another wrap of services, and one of those is Active Protect. And customers often say to me, well, Cyber Essentials is just something I need to do once a year. Mm-hmm. Why should I have that as a monthly wrap on top of my IT support spend? And I think you're probably best placed to help us answer that question.
Yeah, well, I'll probably start with an analogy and then go to a little bit more the actual detail. So we do a car MOT once a year. Everyone would then make sure that they stay on top of any alerts or warnings that happen in their car. But with Cyber Essentials, if you filled in a piece of paper and it's gone in the desk, you have zero visibility over like the controls and implementation year round. And it might be okay in the car world because you're gonna know if your tire's fallen off, right? And that's kind of like, having a car crash or having a cyber incident. But like, there's a lot of smaller things you're not gonna detect. The other major difference is obviously the cyber world moves at 100 times the speed of like the physical world. So take the 14-day requirement. Within 2 weeks of you passing your Cyber Essentials, you could be not Cyber Essentials compliant. As for requirements, you still have this piece of the certificate on your wall, but from a requirements perspective, you're actually not compliant. And that's within 2 weeks of you passing the audit. So like the whole world will have moved on so quickly, and so you're just not going to have the level of protection. That's actually one of the problems we looked at originally. Is like, how do we move this from a point in time to a continuous compliance or an ongoing thing that people do? And so Active Protect is the piece of software we've developed that runs on desktops, mobile devices, really user-friendly, privacy first by design. You can see what it's doing exactly, but it'll check that your configuration of device is correct, that you're not running as an admin account, that your malware protection is running good, that your software's up to date and has no high or critical vulnerabilities. So we're looking through all the stuff you said in your Cyber Essentials. Whenever you filled it in 6 months ago, we're looking through that list every single 15 minutes and making sure that stuff's in place. So for us, that is the only way to do it, because come back to the car, it would be like driving your car and sticking black tape across all your dashboards and just driving and hoping that you're driving the right speed and that you've got no alerts or warnings. We provide them the dashboard and the MSP that they can make sure that everything's fine year round.
So I think this is going back to what we were talking about earlier, those early days where people treated Cyber Essentials as a tick box because they needed to get a certificate to be able to win a tender or something along those lines, has moved on because the world of cyber's moved on. And now a business owner is much more interested in, is my business secure? And that's no good to them knowing that 6 months ago that was secure. They want to know, am I secure today? Have one of my team installed something on a machine that's made me uncompliant and created a risk? Are they not updating something? Am I uncompliant? Have I got a risk of a cyber incident coming up because of that? So this gives them continual knowledge that they are meeting the criteria. And that's the way I would often position it to a business owner when I'm speaking to them. It's about, you want to know that your business is secure, like you want to know that there's money in the bank. You want to know that your business has got the correct Cyber Essentials in place. You launched CyberSmart Learn recently. We touched a little bit earlier on awareness training for the people, but how does Learn actually help people?
I'll talk a bit about like why, because there are probably 1,000 different learning solutions out there, I guess, and probably a few hundred just in cyber. I think still 60% of SMEs or around that, the majority don't do security awareness training. And we're kind of like, well, why don't they do it? What's the problem? So we actually, prior to Learn, we had something we call Learn Lite, which actually gets built into CyberSmart Active Protect, and everyone will get access to that. It's 18 security modules. So starting point for businesses, delivered one a month. It takes about 5 minutes or so for the individual employees or staff and contractors within the customer. So that was our starting point. It solved for what we thought was the problem, which was people just don't do it. So let's give them something for free to like at least say they can do something, like, hey, you've done a security awareness training module. So that was a good foundation, and we still offer that today. Learn is as a result of the feedback we've had around people wanting more choice, more customizability in the learning experience. Like, oh, I really want to train stuff around phishing. So with Learn, they can customize the whole what order the modules come in. So in Learn, there's about 80 modules instead of 18. One of the things we're not trying to do is offer 1,000 plus modules. Like, we think we want to still keep it simple and accessible, and accessibility is probably the biggest thing you will hear at CyberSmart, because it drives our product, it drives our proposition, everything. It's about how do we make it so more people can access it and it's easy to use and it makes sense for them as a business. So you get 80 modules in there, includes phishing simulations as well in setup. So it's kind of the next step on without going full on overkill with a security awareness training solution.
So with these tools, do you think there are any misconceptions that SMEs have about all of the tools? Because there seems to be so many things that we're needing to install on their machines these days in the name of cybersecurity and protection. Mm-hmm. What do you think their misconceptions are around them?
I agree with that as a problem area. So agent sprawl, if you want to call it something, is a thing that MSPs and I think customers have been fighting for a while. Some of, I guess, misconceptions or some of the concerns are around exposure and risk. So think about CrowdStrike. So everyone will have, hopefully everyone's heard about happened there. They pushed out a bad software update. So it wasn't malicious at all, but pushed out a bad software update and it bricked thousands, millions of computers across the world. Big problem, because a lot of that is critical national infrastructure, like in train stations or something. If they're running on version, they've got that software running, it stopped it from working. That's a problem. People can't see where they're going. So that was obviously an agent, and I'm not saying that don't use CrowdStrike. I'm just saying the more agents you have, the more chance something like that is going to happen. So that was one of the problems earlier on, or one of the concerns that happened. The other one I'd say was around like resource and usage. So particularly when we had lower powered computers, like they use a lot of CPU or a lot of memory or a lot of network bandwidth, and we didn't have fast internet. A lot of those type of resource things are coming down over time. So like Active Protect uses like 1% of CPU, for example, or less than, and only when it needs to do something type thing. And same with many other tools. So the resource issue is less of an issue. The third area, and I know we kind of get into nuts and bolts of agents and different technologies, but the third issue would be around compatibility. So like things not playing nicely with each other. And so you might have seen this back in the day where you installed something about, hey, you've got this, but you need to turn this off for this to work properly. Or you've got, like, for example, having two antiviruses running, they'd be trying to scan the same file at the same time and they would clash. Again, less of an issue today. So that being said, these things are starting to get better, but I think there is still a role for more technology consolidation. I think we do have quite a lot of agents running and doing stuff like even CyberSmart. We've got like our VPN, we've got Active Protect, we've got antivirus running. It's like we've got a bunch of tools running to help protect and secure us. Unfortunately, if you want to have a good security posture, you need that. Like there is no super app that has managed to bring everything into one place in just one app. But that being said, because of what we talked about, compatibility and resource usage getting worse, it's usually not a problem. The exposure one is definitely one to watch. Use reputable vendors. Don't go and install free software to try and protect your business. To speak to MSP, get proper vetted, tested software on your device. Don't put random stuff there.
Yeah, and that's what we would say as well, because our packages, of course, what we're installing on our clients' machines is these packages that can notify us of if it is running out of resources, has the backup completed, as well as all of the antivirus and the cyber protection that we've just been talking about there. What I'm interested a little bit in is the relationship between cybersecurity and compliance. So one of our packages, we talked a little bit about our middle package, our secure support, but we also have our secure support compliant. There isn't a huge amount of difference in the actual licenses that are provided, but the fundamental difference is the extent to which we lock down, we manage, we monitor, and we report on the activity that's happening, so that the businesses that are using those, that tend to be compliant businesses like legal and finance, can evidence the level of security and resilience that they've got in place. So thinking about the sort of marriage between cybersecurity and compliance, yeah, your background seems to have both. But why are they important in today's world to have both?
I think it's a really interesting topic. Compliance, there's slightly different lenses at looking at the same problem in a way. Like security is in the cybersecurity world, the practical things we need to do to protect ourselves, and compliance is the ability to make sure that that is in place and demonstrate and evidence it. So in some ways, like to use another analogy, security is like having if we come back to the personal protective equipment, like having all these masks, etc. That's the security measure that stops the infection, and compliance making sure that they all meet the same standard and requirement and people are using them all the time. Sorry to use so many analogies from an era I think we've all tried to forget. So this is kind of like looking at the same problem but from two different ways. You need both, right? You need the security in place when it comes to cybersecurity, and you need to know that it's working and that when there are exceptions, those are tracked, etc. As a company, we do our own ISO audit. We did our first one probably about 9 years ago, and we've just done our recertification. As part of that, they're looking at to make sure our compliance is at the level it needs to be, that we say it is and it should be, and they're making sure that it complies and conforms. And as part of that, they'll check all the things that we say we do. So you need that verification, that additional check on top of it. So I think they go hand in hand. I think compliance can often be seen as like quite a dry, boring part of cybersecurity. I would argue it was pretty exciting. I think it's quite a cool thing to do because you can actually demonstrate what you've got in place is working. If you're a director of a business or you sit on a board, the types of questions you should be asking a compliance related one, not security ones. Not like, how, like, if we got antivirus in place and things like that, you should be like what's our time to patch? Like how long does it take us patch? CyberSmart says 14 days, fine, critical. Are we meeting that deadline? When was the last time we tested our incident recovery plan? So like these type of compliance questions, I think, are the right questions for business directors, boards to be asking, rather than the specific security ones.
So when a company nails the compliance, then how does it make the directors, the owners feel, do you think?
I have to say, what we say at CyberSmart is it gives them confidence, because so our strapline is complete cyber confidence. We try and deliver this, work with our partners at MSPs to make as many organizations as confident in their cybersecurity as possible, because it goes above and beyond like ticking the box. It goes above and beyond like meeting a requirement. It's all about how can you feel like, great, we've got everything in place. My job is, I'm a law firm. My job is like helping clients with their legal challenges and driving client outcomes and creating value for them. It isn't managing my security stack. So the more confident they are that cybersecurity is taken care of with the MSP and they can evidence it, it's not just like you've given it someone else's problem, but if they're confident, then I think that helps them to be more effective. And like you think about some of the rhetoric around the politicians, they think resilience and stability is the key for us growing the economy, and having a resilient nation is really important for us to drive economic growth. This is all very true, and it's as much as true on an individual level as a business. The more stable your business is, the more confident you can be in things like cybersecurity and data protection, the better you can run your operation. You're not dragged down into having to go fix a problem that you probably shouldn't have had in the first place.
So when we're thinking about those SMEs that are probably still saying, oh, my IT company looks after that, and they're not worrying about, what do you think the biggest risks of them ignoring cybersecurity and maybe cyber essentials as well?
This concerns me quite a lot, because I think there's probably far too many people, and I think there's obviously two sides of this coin, right? There's the customer has an obligation or requirement to go a bit above and beyond the, hey, are we secure? And the MSP says yes, and they say, okay, fine, and see you again next year. The MSP also has an obligation requirement in this. I think there's probably quite a bit we need to do here to change this dynamic. I'll talk from the customer perspective. There is an MSP questionnaire you can send to your MSP in line with Cyber Essentials that ASME produce. And it's simple questions you can send to your MSP and they will answer them. Do we update all high critical software vulnerabilities within 14 days? If you're not saying are we secure, you're saying here's the requirements. I don't manage my IT, you manage my IT, so please fill in this form to tell me, and you can read through that, and they're not going to lie. Well, you assume they're not going to lie, so it's accurate. You'll then see they're doing 7 out of 10 things. Okay, they've got some work to do. They're doing all 10, great. Then you don't need to say, are we secure? You say, actually, you're doing that. And then the next question you ask is, great, so when can we get Cyber Essentials? Because you're saying we're doing all this stuff. We should be able to get it today, right? And the plus as well. We should be able to do the audit today because we're doing all this stuff. So I think, ask those questions. I would say the vast majority of MSPs are already offering, want to offer this level of security compliance, and it's more the customer doesn't necessarily know that they need to do this right now. So ask your MSP, and hopefully all of what I started about the problem in the space will start to get eliminated slowly, and everyone can be secure.
That's really great, because I would imagine that most of the people that are in the position of saying our MSP sorts that for us are the people that probably don't necessarily fully understand the technology themselves, and they have a fear of it. So we're having that easy entrance to, here's a list of questions you can ask, and if all of the questions are covered, you don't need to be a technical expert, because you are there to run your business. You're not there, you're employing people to be a technical expert, but you want to be able to challenge them. And that's a really, really good way of doing it.
Yeah, and I get it, right? I've spent a lot of time in cybersecurity, but I'm not a medical professional. If I go to the doctor, and doctors are a regulated profession, right? MSPs are not yet regulated. They will be. We talk about that cybersecurity and resilience bill. But if I go to the doctor and they give me advice, I don't know if that's good advice, bad advice, and it's right. Now, because they're regulated, I have comfort in the fact that, and the way our model works in the UK, I know that they're not trying to do something that I don't want them to do. If I go to a builder, the builders also have code of conduct and requirements too, but they could say, oh, we need to rip out your whole kitchen, and you need a brand, like I got a leak. And they're like, we need to rip out your entire kitchen. You need a brand new one. In fact, we need to do the upstairs as well. And you're kind of like, is this right? Is that what I need to do? Having this set of questions, and this is where I would start, is like, I don't know what to ask the builder, but having the guidance is something at least say, can you tell me, like, does it comply with this safety regulations or whatever? That gives them a frame of reference. So I think everyone should ask those questions. I spoke to a customer a couple of days ago, and I was asking them about security, and this like the owner of the business, and like, how, like, do you know what assets you have in the business? Yeah, we know that, like, everyone gets provided a device, etc. Do you have Cyber Essentials? I'm not sure. Like, you should probably know if you have Cyber Essentials or not, and if you're the director, you probably would know if you had it. I think we have it. And so how do you know your MSP is doing what they say they're doing? Not sure. So it's like, how do we close that gap? Because customers are not expected to be IT or security professionals by any means, but they should be able to ask 5 basic questions to get a good idea of, are they good, bad, great? Yeah.
So from that perspective then, how should those SME owners know if they're passing an audit or actually being cyber secure?
They'll know by looking at if they're doing a Cyber Essentials Plus, the report itself has quite a lot of detail about what was checked and how it was checked and the results. I think that's quite a good way to do it. I think if you ask your MSP to do Cyber Essentials for you, one of the steps in there is you will get a copy of the assessment, the submission, and you'll have to sign a declaration. A director of the business will need to take the time to read what's been written, and you're not going to check every single line, especially when it gets into technical stuff, but like, does that look like your assets or your devices, laptops that you have in the company, or do you know of some that don't exist? when it says like home working, does that look right? Like, are people working from home? Or have they said no one's working from home, and you know that people do, and they often work remotely as well. So I just have a read of that and make sure that reflects reality. If it doesn't reflect reality, start asking some questions and say like, well, this is definitely what we're doing. That's probably the best point there, I think, without getting into the more technical detail, or going speaking to another MSP is another thing you could do. I'm sure that's one option. But I'd say typically work with your MSP as a starting point and say like, listen, we don't want to just pass this. We really want to nail it. And we don't just want it for one day of the year, we want it every day of the year. Those are probably the 2 points I would start with.
So what would be the one thing that they should do before thinking about going down the Cyber Essentials route?
The one thing they should do, I don't think there's like something you should do before you think about going down. I think everyone should be thinking about going down the route, regardless of where you're at, stage of company. As long as you like have something to lose, right? So like if you just got like a side hustle on Etsy, like you're probably okay. Like consumers grade stuff is good, 2FA, make sure you update your devices, etc. Follow government side advice around that. As soon as you start employing someone and you have customers and you're trading, you should think about how you can protect the organization. So I think it's probably not a question of if or like, one thing you should think about, but more like when does it make sense for businesses? My advice would be do it as soon as possible, because once you've done it once, at least you're just maintaining it. If you've got 2 people, you do Cyber Essentials. When you get 20 people or 50 people, you're keeping the same systems, processes, the same questionnaire, you're just updating with the assets, and the same processes. So I'd say start is probably the one thing.
Yeah, perhaps down there and just see how you feel that your business is, and then speak to your MSP.
Or the readiness, the free Cyber Essentials readiness tool. That's a really good starting point too. Or the NCSC Cyber Action toolkit.
So we've identified really that the risk for cybersecurity is all around the people. And we've talked a little bit about how we train and make them cyber aware. But how do we get buy-in from our teams and our people on cybersecurity?
I'd say 2 things. One, people inherently, staff, employees, contractors inherently want to make sure the business succeeds, and they want to do the right thing. So assume positive intent. Don't treat people like they are victims walking around the digital world ready to be hacked, even if that's what the bad people think humans are. I treat them as like, okay, we know that you want to do the right thing. We're going to give you the tools. And like, there's some really interesting studies around cognitive load and how that impacts people's response to phishing. So like basically the more stress someone is and the more pressure, the worse that can be. So actually a lot of stuff around mindfulness has parallels in cybersecurity. But first principle is like assume positive intent from your team, your people. Secondly, the way I'd start with is all the lessons we want to teach you around cybersecurity, all the things we want to expose you to through the training, for example, are as beneficial in your personal life as they are in your work context. And these are, in today's world, these are not nice to have. They're life skills to navigate the digital world, because no one wants their personal email to be hacked, or their Dropbox, or their files and their photos. Like, you're seeing a lot of attacks targeting individuals. You're seeing things like deepfakes happen as well. A lot of it, teenagers, children as well. So I think for a lot of people, you can help to provide some relevance and context by talking about how this can benefit their personal life, and tools and tips they can take in using a password manager. Great piece of technology that applies to no matter what you do, whatever you're using. Setting up 2FA on your personal accounts, again, must do on pretty much everything nowadays. On everything is what I would say. But then if you've got a family, you can teach that to your children as well, your teenagers. Hey, listen, this is what good looks like. You wouldn't want someone like stealing all your photos, right, and putting them on the internet. So I think those are probably 2 starting points, I'd say, from the human side.
I'm just thinking a little bit about our packages, because everything you're saying, when we've designed our packages, it's to try and cover all of these things off, making sure the people understand the cybersecurity risks, making sure the right barriers are in place, those physical things like the antivirus, putting the right monitoring tools in there. I feel like there isn't a huge number of people that are packaging these things. If I look at the MSP market, packaging all of these things together, they might offer them, but they don't literally put them as, this is the wrap that you need. So when you look at how we've positioned our packages alongside then how they match to Cyber Essentials, the core and the complete, what's your opinion on how it all comes together?
I think it's incredible. I think the government has created a really, really good cyber baseline, and I think the market has incentivized and aligned around it. By that, I mean it's being asked for by customers. Like there was a letter that went out to the FTSE 350 last year, and one that went out to small businesses too. But pretty much every couple of weeks, you're seeing something from the government about Cyber Essentials and why businesses see it as a baseline. And the reason for that is it's one of the only schemes worldwide that has empirical evidence as to the efficacy, so the ability to reduce cyber risk for businesses, really high satisfaction, really accessible and affordable for business. So that I think is a really, really good mechanism scheme. And I think the UK is leading globally for what it's doing in SME cyber around certification and requirements. So the fact that you've packaged and you've built your proposition around that as a concept, I think is a really, really good stamp of approval, and something I would encourage all MSPs to do. I know a lot of MSPs see it as an add-on. Oh yeah, well, security is not optional in 2026. Security has to be part of what you do as a business. If you run a business and you rely on the internet, you need to do security, and you want to make sure it's working, back to security and compliance. And so doing Cyber Essentials is the single most effective thing they can do. It's the single most impactful thing from an investment perspective, ROI. You talk about ROI, like go and buy 17 different security tools, or you just do Cyber Essentials, would give you good bang for buck. So to your question, I think it's great, and I wish I'd see more MSPs doing that.
I think what we're seeing is more and more take up these days in people wanting to have the security, but it's for the wrong reasons. It's because they've seen what's happened to M&S, or they've seen what's happened to other businesses. Something might have happened to their business at a small scale and cost them a few £1,000s, and they've realised the risk that they're exposed to, or their friends' businesses that they've been in a situation and think, I don't want that to happen to me. So a lot of people are coming at this, in my view, for the wrong reasons. They should be doing the prevention up front because that's what they want. So what would you say to me or to our listeners that would compel more and more people to take on Cyber Essentials? Because as much as I can talk about it all day long and suggest to our customers that they have it and give them the compelling reasons, is there anything that you could say that could really emphasize why everybody should have Cyber Essentials?
I think I've probably got a few points around this. If we start from what are the value that it can be created for an SME. So there's contractual requirements. So you mentioned the cyber attacks, etc. I often see it as, and you also mentioned around that, like what I effectively call a knee-jerk reaction. Something happens and they do something. I actually see most of the behavior, like around Cyber Essential certification and security, is driven by almost like a bucket of water that is getting cups added to it. And one cup is like, oh, I've read something on the news. The other cup is, someone lost the laptop somewhere. And eventually the bucket gets so full. And then when it gets full, then someone does something about it. So it's kind of a culmination of different things people hear. And so the question I think you're asking is, like, it shouldn't be that way. You know, you don't, in many other aspects in life, you don't wait until things get untenable to resolve them. You do it proactively. Maybe not the dentist. That's probably another similar example. But like the dentist, if we can make it simpler and more accessible, in other words, lower that barrier to entry, a lot more people would do it more proactively. I think a lot of what customers need to realize, first thing I say is, it's probably easier and it's going to cost less and it's less painful than you can imagine. So the barrier to entry is actually pretty low. Cyber Essentials is a good starting point for that. So it's probably easier than you think. It's going to cost you less money than you think. And the amount of risk reduction it's going to give you relative to anything else you spend money on as a business is going to be outsized, so that it's a really good area to invest in. It can help you win customers. It can demonstrate to your existing customers that you're secure and compliant, and it'll give you the peace of mind that your business run effectively. I'd start at that point. I mean, I could obviously talk about why they should do it all day. I guess what are the alternatives is another way of looking at it. Like, if you don't go and do this, what else are you going to do? And ultimately, in that world, you're relying on a collection of different frameworks, of different tools, and building something together yourself. Maybe like, oh, we got a VPN here, we got a password manager there. I read something over here, and I read over this. I read over this somewhere else, and it's just like, that isn't going to work for you. That isn't going to protect you. You can go write a load of policies for your company, and no one follows them. That also isn't going to protect you. So like, there are no other viable alternatives, in my opinion, than starting with this.
It's really, really good. Thank you very much. You've given us a lot of help and advice, but I'm going to ask you one more piece of information. So, Jamie, if you can bring over our light bulb.
Oh gosh. Okay.
And I'm going to hand you this, and I'm going to ask you, what would be the one piece of advice or guidance that you could give from your world that would help our viewers today?
Oh gosh, what is this? It's like
It's your bright idea.
Oh, some bright idea. Oh gosh. Okay. Well, I probably should have thought about what my bright idea was. I think we've talked a lot about Cyber Essentials, so I'm not going to talk about that. I would say, so the one thing that I think is really, from my profession, my career, the one thing that has inspired me, the one mindset that inspired me the most is being curious. And I would say this actually applies not just in cybersecurity, but in general life. So I'd say, if there's one thing I'd like people to take away from a mindset perspective, be curious. Why does it work like that? How does Cyber Essentials work? Not about Cyber Essentials, but why does my industry work like that? I think that's a really good thing that a lot of people hopefully listening, business owners, people that are in positions where they're kind of responsible for decisions, right? So be curious is probably my one idea, if that's an idea.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And our viewers, of course, are going to want to know a little bit about you. So I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions here. So the first thing that comes into your mind, are you a morning person or a night owl?
Morning.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Book or movie?
Movie.
Beach or city?
Beach.
Pizza or pasta?
Pasta.
Apple or Microsoft?
Apple.
Email or WhatsApp?
WhatsApp.
Clean desk or organized chaos?
Organized chaos.
Short checklists or detailed guides?
Detailed guides.
That's brilliant.
Oh,
thank you very much, Jamie. It's been absolutely great having you on the podcast today. But normally I would say, how can people get in touch with you? But of course, they can speak to us, and we can deal with linking everything in. But if people do have a question, or they want to know a little bit more about Cyber Essentials, how can they get in touch with you?
If they want to know about Cyber Essentials, have a question, they should definitely speak to you. It's definitely a starting point, because you can help guide them through that. If they want to connect with me directly or personally, they can connect with me on LinkedIn, just Jamie Akhtar on LinkedIn. So yeah, happy to connect.
And people might want to read a little bit more about CyberSmart, because although they're dealing with us and they're our customers, and they want to actually go down the Cyber Essentials journey, they maybe want to know that we've partnered with a great organization. So how can they read more about you guys or find a little bit more out about you?
Yeah, and that's actually a really good thing that people should do, is look up the recommendation of products that are being recommended, because like, are they secure? Where are they hosted? Like, these kinds of questions I think are relevant and interesting. So they can go to cybersmart.co.uk. We've got all of our information there, security credentials, FAQs, all about the products, etc. And if you see something that you like, and you can speak to Linton about it.
Fantastic. Well, it's been great, Jamie, and thank you for all of the insight. I think it's been really valuable.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us.
Nice. It's okay.